And so I was taking care, noting as I climbed. And it wasn't a climb where you're going straight up. It was a climb where you go up a little bit and then you take a little bit bigger step. I was really noticing everything that I did so that I knew that I could always get down again. So I never took a step that was too big that I wouldn't be able to either slide or jump down. And I got to probably, not even up to there, I got to about there and I sat down and meditated and I stood up. And I couldn't figure out how to get down. And I thought, oh, what's happened to me? So I walked around and I kept thinking, well, I got up here, I obviously have to get down. And the landscape and terrain was really, really different. And so in the end, I just put my hands out behind me and I slid. And I just slid until I got to a point where I could stand up and walk, because I didn't quite know how the ladder and the fire engine people were going to come and get me. But so Sedona is a cluster of different energies and templates around the world, and they're often, because they're in the Hopi land, they're connected to the Pleiadians. Taupo in New Zealand, that's actually a picture of Taranaki, which is not quite Taupo, but in Taupo you've got dragon energy lines, you have a being in the lake, you have a whole load of things that are going on in Taupo in New Zealand, and some of the stories I'm going to talk about later all come from different parts of these places. In Cappadocia in Turkey is another energy template where it has ancient history and wisdom, and also beings that have come to help from different places. Peru and Sacred Valley in Peru. I'll be talking about Peru quite a bit, not necessarily mentioning Peru, but I'll be talking about Pleiadian visitations and also imprints and interacting with them, and many of them were based in the ones that I've chosen today to include from Peru. And then County Meath in Ireland. And you've got Newgrange, which the entrance is there, and you walk in and you're almost in the centre, and at certain times of the year the sun comes in and lights up all the way down the shaft. This used to be covered over with rubble and they rebuilt the outside. Excuse me. They didn't build the inside because they didn't need to, and they couldn't have redone it because they didn't know how to do that. And there's lots of spirals everywhere, but there's Newgrange, Nouth, Douth, and then you've got the Hill of Tara, you've got a lot of stone circles in that area. So they are all templates that have been imprinted and placed deliberately. Now, it might seem like I'm jumping a little bit, but I'm trying to give you information before I go back to a little bit more information about the different energies that place the templates. But one of the places that I was called to go to was Malta, and I had been working with churches in London, cleansing some of the, let's say, darker energies that were in the geomantic and sacred geometric principles of the churches. And at that time, it became really clear about some of the energetic lines around the planet. This was happening in the 1980s. The sacred geometric lines in the planet that connected different places. Not so much, well, it may seem peculiarly that they were connecting, but it was actually something that made sense energetically. So I was doing all of that, worked with some churches to cleanse them, and it seemed like it was a very masculine thing that was being cleansed. England, London at the time was very much full of masculine buildings coming up. It was very much a new phase in everyone can be wealthy, everyone can be successful. We'll build these nice big phallic symbols to just show you how much power and presentation we've actually got. But some of us were preparing London for the energies of the divine feminine and clearing those energies away. So working on the churches, and it became clear that we needed to go to Malta. And this island here in Malta, Gozo, in about 3200 BC, was dedicated to the goddess Calypso. There are I think it's either 32 or 37 goddess temples on the island of Gozo. That's a lot. And Gozo's maybe 10 miles across, so a lot of temples. And then here you've got well-known temples as well. And so the Jantia temple is around here, and here you've got lots of goddess temples. So drawn to go and work there, and it was about clearing energy fields, helping to wake consciousness for humans in the future, also helping to clear the field so that that divine consciousness and galactic consciousness could begin to move through the earth. Now this was also a time when the crop circles first began to appear, and I had a lot to do with the crop circles in the UK. And I got a strong connection every time with Malta with the crop circles. And so the crop circles are landing in a place in Wiltshire. Of course, they've gone to other places now, but at the time when they were first beginning to appear, they were landing in a particular template that was enabling the energy, the galactic consciousness energy within them to move through the grids of the earth and begin to allow the awakening to happen, and our recognition that we're living on a planet that is alive. Okay, so in my process of starting to remember what I came to do, I realised that I was an esoteric map maker and a grid engineer, and I was starseeded for that purpose. Done it before, we'll do it again if need be. To work with the higher intelligence and cosmic beings via telepathic, clairvoyant and physical contact. So go to different places, help align different energies, as I said before, do certain initiation processes which allow more information to come forward, and the engineer is like a grid engineer, so if I'm required to do something, I will do it. Now, I don't turn up and just do what I feel like doing. If I go to a place, I wait until I'm invited by the energies and the guardians there, sometimes physical, often not. And I work in alignment with them to do what I'm asked to do. And that's really important because it's important to recognise the Earth as a living, breathing being. She has guardians and cosmic beings in place for a particular reason. There are also ancestors to look after places. So it's a specialised role. I've met a lot of people who are light workers. I've met quite a few starseeds. I've only met 2 other esoteric map makers. And so it's quite specialist. We've come in from other places and other times to do it. And so part of what I do is help others develop a relationship with the Earth and her cosmos, and help encode others with high frequency healing and share information, and also work individually with people. So let's get on to some of the people that I work with. Now that's Pan. And Pan has been, mythologized and pictures of all over the planet. And so in Southwest America, he appears as Kokopelli. In Celtic, he tends to appear as the horned god. And you can see there, he's got these horns. And in Mediterranean culture, he's considered the, not a sex god, very virile, very potent, and he spent a lot of time with the nymphs just enjoying himself. What Pan actually does is he looks after places on the planet, and he has beings who work underneath him, of course. And Pan is also connected to the stories around the planet of the Pied Piper, and travelling around with a pipe, taking all the children away. And so a lot of these stories that we start to hear, and some of them I'll mention, like Noah's Ark, and I mentioned Jason and the Argonauts and other things, these are veiled esoteric wisdoms that we have forgotten. We've forgotten that they're actually showing us our galactic sovereign selves. And it's been deliberately masked often in order to enable us to forget who we really are. So Pan. He uses the flute actually to heal and lift frequencies. So he's not just a stud at parties. Then I also work with divine beings like this one, and for anyone who's been to Egypt or is familiar with Akhenaten, this is an image of Akhenaten. Now, Akhenaten came at a time when things changed quite a lot in Egypt. They'd been very much believing in all gods, and then he came along and said it's about the sun, hence the Aten, that was the word for sun. He's got a hat on. Well, he's actually more got a cone, a crown, because underneath here, if you remember, we just had the talk from Evan and Stephen Strong. His head shape was different. His body shape was also different. Science has said it's because he had some kind of an illness. But in my experiences with him and others, and also in my experiences in esoteric circles, he was the father of Tutankhamun, and Nefertiti was his wife, but they had directly come into this planet in order to seed us for another round. And Tutankhamun was killed by the priests because they didn't want this information to keep building. And if anyone's ever read the book Om Seti, when they write about this woman channeled, she didn't actually channel it, she had interactions with a being called Om Seti. Om Seti is very scathing of Akhenaten and came in and damaged and ruined everything. But so Tutankhamun was found by Howard Carter. And in the research that I've done, Howard Carter was one of the priests who encouraged Tutankhamun to be killed. So it's almost like there's this karmic trace that's going back. So got rid of him, brought him back to our consciousness. That said, if you've ever been to Tutankhamun's tomb or if you've ever seen any exhibitions, some people say that there's a great deal of power around Tutankhamun and the tomb was cursed and various other things and need to be careful. When I was in Egypt one time, I wanted to go to Tutankhamun's tomb, and I came from the West Bank across, and there was a bus of, say, 30 people. I was the only one who was going into Tutankhamun's tomb. The others were going to Ramses and other places. And the bus driver said to me, well, when you get to the tomb, you have to wait for the person to take you in. You're not allowed to go in by yourself. And there will always be someone guarding the gate. So they dropped me off, and I had to walk along into a particular area to get into it. And I stood at the door, and there was no one there. I called out, and there was no one there. And I waited for about 10 minutes, and I thought, I think this is a sign. I think I'm supposed to go in by myself. So I went in and spent probably a good hour in there. And I'd already spent time with the artifacts and his energy presence in the museum in Cairo. And if you do ever go to the museum in Cairo, certainly 20 odd years ago there, it was a very, very interesting place because the energies there were suffering grief from having been taken from their places, their domiciles. And that's what we do as Westerners. We go in, we're interested in doing research, we're interested in doing certain things, but we forget that we are raping and pillaging in our own way. Oh, okay, so I should move along probably a bit faster. Also work with the I am presence, which is the sense of, okay, I've just tried to pick images that give a fairly good identification of what I'm talking about. I'm not saying this is exactly how everything is. So this is the humans, this is our light body, and this is the consciousness, the sun consciousness that we all are. So at different levels when I'm working as an esoteric map maker, it's where is the energy that I'm interacting with coming from, and where does it relate to the 3D, the light body, and then galactic consciousness. Also work with these beings, these are praying mantis beings. When I interact with them, if They don't always have a physical form because they're at a density that's not necessarily physical. But if they do have a physical form, they're really, 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 really big. And they're golden, and they have a frequency that's really quite large. And in my experiences with them, it's always been positive. And they interact with me in order to assist in, they usually ask me to do something that's about keeping energies clear and well looked after, often waterways and places. In New Zealand I had a lot of interactions with the praying mantis, and in Malta also, and other places, but also work with the Ray Masters. And the Ray Masters, there's often stories I hear now about the Ray Masters can't be trusted, it's all an illusion, angels can't be trusted, it's all an illusion. I think everything's all an illusion, really. But so, okay. So the Ray Masters will come and interact with them. Actually, I'm just going to go back because these others, images, beautiful as they are, could be a bit distracting. Some starseeds are born with an extra genetic strand that at a certain point in their life gets activated. And some of us have that and other things as well, and as an esoteric map have that extra DNA thing, and we're all going to have it eventually, so it's not that we're precious, it's just that we all have different ways of doing things. But as an esoteric map maker, I needed to work with numerous Ray Masters. And the term Ray Masters is actually because they're all in charge of different rays. And they live in celestial cities, light cities around the earth, because many of the sacred sites have a light city above them, and they're celestial cities, and they have guardians at different places. And so we look at the rainbow, and we see this amazing thing of light in the sky, and it's not quite the same as a rainbow, but they're in charge of the different rays, so red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, violet. And as an esoteric map maker, it was important that I worked with more than one ray, because most of us come in on one ray of service. And it depends on what we've come to do, whether we're a blue ray, a red ray. Red ray is often, a scarlet ray is often connected to Christ consciousness and that element of service that whether Jesus existed or not, but what the mythologies tell us about that energy of a service. And the green ray is often a service of healing, and every ray is different, and each of them have different masters who look after those energy rays. And so in the work that I do, they come and assist and show me different things. Sometimes I'm fortunate to witness a bit of a light show, and they work with activating different energy centers on the planet in order to bring them back to times past, because we're cyclic. There's the past and the present that we keep coming back to, a lot of stuff that we've forgotten. Then there's the angels who come. Some of them are coming to cleanse and heal, but there's also the angels, which I'm going to talk about later, which are really, really up there in the beginnings of things. And the lion people and the Lyran people from Sirius who come in now. In my interactions with the lion people, they're often closely aligned with the crystal people, and the crystal people are quite ethereal looking, quite light looking, and when they discuss things, they're quite technical because they've got crystals. So it's like, it's not that they're not emotional, but they're not deeply emotional. They're more about, this is the information you need, it's quite technical, this is what you're going to do. Lion beings, on the other hand, have helped to seed humanity, and they're quite emotional, and they're similar to us in the way that they approach things emotionally, in my experiences. So again, I'm giving you what my experiences are. If you've had different experiences and they don't resonate, that's okay. I'm just showing one viewpoint of things. And Metatron. And Metatron is connected to sacred geometry, hence this image is also connected to the platonic solids and how everything was formed in the universe. And so you've got the triangle, the circles, the octagon. Is it an octagon?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Octagon and the circles. And he comes through differently for everybody. And when he comes through, he's often quite a joker. Most people don't get that aspect in Metatron, but with my interactions with him, he's quite a joker. And so he'll turn up with Ugg boots on a hot day and say, I've just come to play. Or he'll do different things. But he's actually taught me a lot about different ways that you can use your hands for healing. And I'm not talking about hands-on healing, I'm talking about the different ways that energy comes forward from our bodies and how you can then access geometric principles doing that. Okay, so back to here I am in Malta. I'm working with these beings. I'm at the goddess temples. Isn't that a stunning picture? That is Jantia Temple. And the name Jantia came because of the giants. That's the Maltese version of the word giants. So the story goes they came overnight and built the goddess temple, the giant temple. And a little bit later I'll talk a bit more about the giants. And what I find fascinating, and I've mentioned this in some of this stuff in other talks, but what I find fascinating about all these temples is, they're on, this one is on Gozo. During the Second World War, Malta was the most heavily bombed place of anywhere. And it's actually, as far as I'm aware at this point, the most heavily bombed place of anywhere that's ever happened in our lifetimes. Yet, none of these buildings were damaged. So, they have a really profound energy template around them that's protecting them and keeping them safe for us to learn from and understand more. And we're really, really fortunate to have that experience with these temples. So, the esoteric mapmaker in Malta worked with Syrians, the Elohim. Now, I'll talk a little bit about the Elohim later. Oannes, I'll talk about him. Oannes is a fish, half man, half fish. I'll talk about him. Akhenaten I've mentioned, and the dolphins, they all come, this line, they all come from Sirius. Then the Pleiadians, ant beings, in the earth, and Mithraic sun temples. Again, I'll show more about that. Cosmic eggs, domes, arcs, angels, and Orions. They're not all necessarily connected. They're just all on one line for the purposes of this talk. But cosmic eggs are places where, as a light worker and a grid engineer, called in to activate the cosmic egg. And the cosmic egg activates an aspect of the grid engineer, and in return the grid engineer activates the cosmic egg, and then that helps to move the energy around into the landscape. It also is important for deep and profound healing of the inner child. And that's really important because many of us are broken children and we haven't healed all that stuff yet. Domes were first put on the planet in the first seeding of the planet, when the planet was designed, and then the beings got together in what I call the blue room, the cosmic architects, and they created the planet and they created everything that was happening, and they put domes in. Then the domes weren't functioning properly, and eventually I think the domes will come back to function fully again, and they're over mountains and they have interconnecting energy places, and they're also important for dragon energies. Arcs, there's often arcs that will be shown up. Arcs are a geometric template where energy runs in a particular pattern and brings cosmic consciousness. That's also made me think that I talk about this in the book that I wrote about my work in Malta. I wasn't ever planning on writing anything, and I was on a plane returning to London from my time in Malta, and suddenly this big booming voice comes in my ear, "You must write about this." And I'm like, oh, before that I'd had something weird going on with a phoenix. The night before I was trying to sleep, and this phoenix kept flying in my dreams or in my vision, and it would fly and then it would crash land. And I was like, is this a phoenix or is this a sign that the plane I'm travelling on tomorrow is going to crash? So I spent some time trying to figure it out. Anyway, it became clear to me that it wasn't a sign that the plane was going to crash. But so I got on the plane and I was aware that this phoenix thing had happened. And then as I sat on the plane, this phoenix came back into the vision again. And it flew across and then it just fell to the ground like a dive bomber, wings behind it, just flew to the ground and hit the ground really hard. And I was thinking, oh, maybe it is the plane that's going to crash. And then I watched it and it hit the ground and it turned into flames and it emulated and it became a new bird. And so I knew something deep and profound had happened for me, and perhaps even in the work, but definitely for me. And shortly after, the voice said, you must write about this. And I was like, what, about the phoenix or about something else? So anyway, I ended up writing about some of the work that I did in Malta. It's just one of the places, apparently they want me to do other writing, but in that I talk about the different work in different aspects and different beings. So also working with dragons and dragon lines, I'll explore a little bit about that. The praying mantis I've talked about, always going to a site and recognising that these people and Pan is there along with others so that you can have that relationship. The Ray Masters and the gods of Olympus. Anyone been to the British Museum? In the British Museum, just shortly after you enter, you walk up some stairs and then you walk in. Right in front of you, against the wall, is I don't know whether it's a replica, I hope it's a replica, or whether they dismantled something original and then remantled it there. But there's all the gods of Olympus are guarding the British Museum. And the gods of Olympus are part of the stories of the Ray Masters. So I find it really interesting going to the British Museum, where they've got some stunning stuff there, but unfortunately a lot of it's been raped and pillaged. And they're the gods of Olympus. I took some pictures in there, all came out with different coloured orbs and different things. Actually, I take a lot of photos and get some very strange things in my photos, but okay. Stories about Noah's Ark, Jason and the Argonauts. So it might be time to tell that now before I move on quickly. In Turkey is a place that many people visit that is said to have the Ark. And it's near a place called Bayezid in Turkey. And you can see the mountain, the Armenian mountains in the distance, and many archaeologists and other researchers go there regularly to establish what the Ark looks like, how many cubits it was. And I went there and didn't go into the mountains, but you could see it from where I was in the village. And you can feel the energy of it. And the thing is about this Noah's Ark, it's an energy template. And so if you access an energy template of Noah's Ark, you start to have memories of the flood. You start to have memories of boats. You start to have memories of people leaving Atlantis, leaving Lemuria, bringing consciousness forward. So many of these templates around the planet are actually places that help us understand more. And they're all guarded and looked after by particular cosmic beings. Griffins may be looking after different places, Pan and elemental beings, the Syrians, the Elohim and others. So you have to learn ways of interacting with them. Jason and the Argonauts. Now Noah's Ark is also a Mediterranean myth, but it's been disguised in other countries. I mentioned Oannes before, and Oannes is a half fish, half man god. And he had all the knowledge. He's called Urdu in different places. He's called, it'll come, sorry. He is connected to Neptune, absolutely. There's a word that starts with M and it's gone, sorry? Manu. Sorry, my brain's in a different place today for words. So, he's connected with that. Now in Malta, he came out of the ocean and began to show information, and he stood tall and he was half man, half fish. He was connected to Neptune and the trident, and so those stories that you come across, they're all connected to ancient wisdoms that have been veiled. Okay. Jason and the Argonauts, he took a boat, he went over to Georgia in the Mediterranean in order to claim the Golden Fleece. And the Golden Fleece is actually a time travel device. And it's activated, and Jason and the Argonauts, Noah's Ark, the Holy Grail, all those stories are really stories about activating and becoming more spiritual within ourselves. And all of our friends in the cosmos have been helping us to try to remember this stuff. And then Calypso, who is the goddess Calypso, I'm going to go a bit quicker because I'm aware of time, but goddess Calypso is to do with time and how to understand the wisdom of time. I actually talk about her in the book as well. And then it's all about the divine feminine and Christ consciousness. Okay, so how did these energies get here? Well, they're all over the planet. They're in physical form and they're in light temple form. And they were energized and imprinted by all these people and more, but I've just given you a selection. So any of these places may have been infused or energized or been connected to any of these beings, many of whom you've probably heard of. The angelic realms, connected to the Ophanim, come back. The Ophanim, the Elohim, and the Nephilim. The Ophanim are often shown up in history as wheels, really fast-moving wooden wheels, and this is because they come, and an eye, and they come through like that. They are really ancient and helped to place a lot of the energy patterns on the earth, and they're coming through a lot to help us to understand. I interact with them quite a lot. And the Elohim, I'll mention in the next slide, and then the Nephilim. And there are all sorts of consciousness stories that keep coming out of. I remember, maybe some of you do as well, somewhere between 15 to 20 years ago, the Bible was considered to not be true. And then, now it's become a historical device for us to all remember things, and a lot of people are starting to talk about, well, the Nephilim came in and they changed our structure and they did all this sort of stuff. And I think it's really interesting that even though we're not sure exactly what's happening with that information yet, on a general collective level, it's coming through because it's time for us to recognize some of this beginning stuff. So the Elohim created, according to what I've understood from the Ophanim and other beings, they created the physical megalithic and geomantic structures in the earth grid. And they did this so that at some point there would be a consciousness matrix upon the planet, and humans or some other conscious being could interact with them. Because it wasn't always planned that it would be humans who would be doing what we do. And that there was potential for paradise to be created on Earth, which is where we always get the symbolism of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, paradise on Earth, and all of those, because they were imprinted into our DNA and RNA and mythologies. So these are some of the Elohim structures. You can read that. So all over the planet, these enormous, and that's because the Elohim can also be seen as giants. So if you hear stories about giants, like Jantia, the temples, they were created by the Elohim because they can present themselves as giants. And the Cyclops as well, the one-eyed beings, working close connection to the Elohim and the giants. Sirius A and B, that's Oannes, I mentioned before. He's connected to Sirius as well. The lion people, crystal people, some of which I mentioned. Sekhmet, who's the goddess in Egypt. Akhenaten, the dolphins, Oannes, Elohim. And then we've got the lion people, and you can see again that connection to Egypt. They come and help with the work as well. Akhenaten. This is another picture of Oannes, and I wanted to show that because in many Mediterranean myths, he doesn't necessarily appear as a human, or people get it confused with the Sumerian and Anunnaki images. But there are some pottery and other things where he actually appears as a dolphin. And there's been some statues made that really look like a dolphin from one angle, on the other side they look like a human. So definitely connected with the dolphin and the psychopomp for spiritual growth. So Pleiades, Hyperborean temples, Mithrate temples, ant beings, ribbon beings. These are all, if you come across any of these, you know you're interacting with the Pleiadians. So Hyperborean time label. Everything's hard to say today. Okay. So these are some Lemurian crystals that have shown up recently in South America. Amazing. They've just suddenly unearthed themselves. These are energy libraries. This is the time libraries, not necessarily